We are a community of restorytellers, forged from the land of Johnny Cash and other journeymen who wore their transgressions on their sleeve and wrote restoration in their songs. We're a ragtag bunch of outlaws, outliers, poets and saints who share a common bond, a narrative that unites us together. That we once were lost, but we've been found. We're like wood rescued from the fire, and we've been restored to life by a carpenter with an imagination for what we could be. Adopted by a father who looks at our scars and calls them his own. So we band together as a family, guided by one question. What if church wasn't a destination, but a journey? A path we walk where, together, we seek the truth, explore, ask for wonder, embrace mystery, and practice sacrificial love. What if the movement of God wasn't contained by walls, but woven into the fabric of our neighborhoods, into the ongoing collision of imperfect stories that construct our city? We're on an adventure to embody this movement, to know, live, and tell the love story of Jesus, the life, death, and resurrection of the living and all-powerful God. We write, we sing, we dance, we build, we design, we create, we play, we parent, we give, to awaken the imagination to this, that life is a liturgy and church is a journey.
What do you think? Does that feel right? That feel all right? Our team's been working on that for about 4 months. I got a phone call from a guy named Paul Farmer. You may remember Paul. Paul was on our staff for a little while, and then Paul's been serving as an elder for the last 3 years. And Paul, we basically were like, Paul was just like a short stint on staff, but when he was here, he brought so much creativity and life. We came up with this team called Cartography, and it was the days where we'd have like portraits, and we threw flowers at Easter, and just crazy, you walked in, it smelled like pine trees. Paul brought all this stuff, and we knew he couldn't stay on staff long. He had to move to Hawaii or something, I don't know. But for years, we were like, Paul, is there anyone else? That was such a gift, the ability to communicate who we are from the heart. So he called us one day, he goes, well, I got this guy who I think could find the right person. We said, who is he? He said, CJ Cassiata. He's got his own podcast. He travels the world helping people find their stories, and I think he could probably find the right person for us. I'm like, oh, great, call him. So he calls up CJ and says, CJ, we're looking for somebody just who can really help us tell our story well. And CJ said, well, for what church? He said, the Journey Church. CJ said, well, it's not been on my radar to be in a church staff, that's for sure. But I think I'd be open to a conversation. So that was when Paul called me back and was like, hey, you're not going to believe this, but the guy said we could that guy said he'd talk to us. And long story short, as we hired CJ 4 months ago, would you please welcome to the stage Mr. CJ Cassiata. I can't tell you how happy I am you're here.
I'm happy to be here too, man. So yeah, you brought on this crazy guy.
Yeah.
To help tell stories.
Yes.
First one, story of journey as a church. And now we're here.
And here we are. You hit it at an interesting time.
Yeah, it looks pretty, that's all right. Yeah, it looks awesome.
Hey, this feels pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, this was a gym.
Yeah.
Now it's not.
Now it's not.
Wow, that's crazy. There's so many people who've helped put this day together. It's not even funny. It's just crazy. So we've got some new messages. You got a little booklet with stuff in it. We've got some new images. You've seen a couple of things. And what I wanted to do is sort of use this time and really interview you about these changes that we've made, these words and these expressions that we've started to, put paper to. Because the hope is that over the past couple of months, we've created something that really looks and feels and sounds like the people who are in this room and the people that will continue to fill this room from week to week. So is that good?
And why is this messaging so? I mean, I think I know the question. I know you're supposed to interview me, but I want to interview you a second because I want to ask you this question. Why is messaging so important, and why is it so important that we have clarity of vision? The second part, we went through a season. We knew we were leaving the factory.
Sure.
We always said we weren't a church that was attached to a building, and I wrote down in my journal, God, I hope we always walk in faith, which I've tried to delete since then. I mentioned that last week. And really went through a difficult season only because there was literally okay, we might not be a church that's attached to a building, but we got to be somewhere. And we had multiple things fall through. A number of our staff went on to plant churches, do other things. We were in me personally, in a very difficult season. And I was begging God for clarity of vision and couldn't find it.
Yeah.
To the point that I was questioning, am I supposed to be the pastor? And is there somebody else supposed to take the job? Do you remember I was like, hey, do we ever wrap it up as a church? And you got here, and one of the first things you did with us as a staff is you took us away for 3 days, and you said, well, I need to know this. If I'm going to be a part of this story, I need to know the story. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because I remember those 3 days us going, is there supposed to be a 2.0? What does a church do in the throes of transition? And it struck me when you went, you're all, what you said, what I try to do is help people realize how they're weird. You're really weird as a church.
That's why I'm on staff here.
But talk about that. Why is the messaging so important in clarity of vision?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we work really well together is we're both words guys, and you can throw a new logo on stuff, a new website, but if you don't know who you are and you can't communicate that clearly, it gets tough to spread that story. And the cool thing about Journey is you guys know who you are. You've always known who you are. And I think where I've hopefully been useful is somebody who kind of came from the outside a little bit and was able to kind of put some new words. And sometimes we made up some words, to be honest with you,
which was exciting for me.
Describe the weirdness that is Journey. But I just think words are really important. I really do. And when you put there are some things that we put on paper now are on the website, and we're like, oh dang, now we got to go live that out. We got to make sure that we're. So yeah.
Where you've been really good for us is when we started Journey, there were a whole lot of words I didn't want to use. They were because they were attached to baggage for a lot of people.
Sure.
So we were just making stuff up, but the whole thing was let's just come up with a word that is an alternate word to this. A lot of that, but you've come in and said, well. I think you just need some new language that's not just reactionary to where you have baggage, but you need some new language that speaks forward to the vision.
Yeah.
And that really we're being rebirthed. And you're helping giving language to that. And that video was such a great way to kind of kick that off.
It's great.
So I'm supposed to be interviewed. What am I supposed to talk about again?
No, I think let's start with this weird phrase, storytellers.
Okay.
What does that mean? So, when I first got here, I was telling people, I'm just playing the part of, an investigative reporter for, a month or two. I'm just here to listen for patterns, for ideas, for themes that resonated. If you remember during that time, I asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I was just question asker. I probably annoyed
the
heck out of you.
Good, healthy conflict.
And what I found, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
It was interesting.
So I found that over and over again, when I was running into people, whether they were on staff, whether they went here, whether they just kind of knew of Journey from afar, these two themes kept on coming up over and over and over again. One is that Journey has always been this place where restoration happens. Really happens. People get restored, people deal with their stuff, and it's emotionally safe. It's this place where there's not, judgment, or there's not, all of this stuff that kind of comes with people's idea of what church should look like.
Not just ideas, some of our experience.
And their
And
experience
I
too,
think
growing up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of what shaped this, I think, is some of us have grew up in religious circles. So I was just talking with one of the ladies who goes to our church, and she was walking me. She goes, I grew up Baptist, then Pentecostal, then I was Mormon, then I came here. Wow, you have an interesting perspective of faith. And she was talking about how Journey in so many ways had rescued her. It was interesting too, because she was saying, I'm realizing I never thought I was a creative person, and I'm coming to understand that I parent creatively. And she's part of the foster care.
Good.
Yeah. But so many of us have had backgrounds, I certainly did, where the church experience was led out by fear and shame.
Yeah.
A fear that I wasn't doing enough, and as a Christian, and there was some behavioral modification that had happened that day, and then shame for what I didn't, which was tied to kind of a doing too. Both of them were tied to the doing.
Yeah.
They really had nothing to do with who I was or my identity before God. It led out with some kind of behavioral thing, which may or may not have been wrong, but in their context wasn't what that religious society wanted.
Right.
And so to go, well, how? I mean, I didn't feel emotionally safe in the church. If you said the wrong thing, you were going to get fried.
Yeah.
For me, so to try and create a place where there was emotional safety in where people could be heard and known, that was two of the baseline premises of planting Journey.
I feel like we've done that, and we're always going to be that. It's a place. You mentioned doing versus being. It's a place to be. It's a place to be. So restoration was a big, big theme. The second thing was this like pull to make, to create, to tell stories. I mean, if you look over the past 10 years, we've just got this whole entire community of people who make stuff, and they make stuff pretty well.
Yeah.
Songs, books, films, videos, designs, all that kind of stuff. I mean, even if you look at this room, again, this was a gym like at 5 a.m. this morning, and now it's not. And what's funny is that pull to create, whether people did it for a living or not, usually came, again, I'm going back to these conversations I had like a couple of months ago. That call to create, that urge to design, to make, usually came after there was some sense of like restoration or healing. And so we're here today, and what I try to do is pull those two parts of the identity of this church together and just make a word, and it's called Restorytellers. We are a community of restore-y-tellers. We talk about our restoration. We wear it in our sleeves, maybe sometimes too much, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we're not afraid of it, and we tell those stories. We use our creativity. Again, whether we are a creative person or think we're a creative person or not.
Because our premise is that everyone is.
Everyone is creative.
And we are all being restored.
Absolutely.
And so that's where this term comes from. So what if we just have, we have our own word now. It's called Restorytellers. And if people are like, well, why aren't you just a storyteller? Well, because a storyteller is fairly arbitrary. We can tell a story about anything, but we're storytellers because we believe that God is restoring. And that our stories, that this story is a restored story. We're restoring. Some of you have been restoried. Like you came and you were like, the last thing in the world I want to do is talk about my stories. Well, I mean, and I don't even I have so many people that I'll be like, what's your story? I don't have a story. Oh, yeah, but you do. One of the things that we discovered, and it's throughout the biblical narrative, but I'm going to pull out a quick piece, if I can, in Scripture that I think really highlights this. There's an interesting narrative that runs through Scripture, and that's that we come to God, we have this thing called our life, and you know what He does with it? He breaks it. And another way you could look at it is we come to God with this thing called our ego. You know what He does with it? He breaks it. He breaks it and He flushes out of us shame and He exposes insecurity. He takes us on this journey and then He hands it back to us. But you know what He does? He breathes new life into it. So those of you who have been broken and redeemed, you know what I'm talking about. That God didn't delete your story, but He redeemed it. That the very places you were broken are the things now that give you perspective. Before you were broken, perhaps you were judgmental. And then you know what? You fell apart, and it got real hard to be judgmental. And you walk with a new humility. Why? Simply because you fell. Simply because you woke up to some of the hidden motives inside your story. And now there's an empathy that exists in you that didn't exist previously. Well, what happened? Something got flushed out of you. You were given life, and when you brought the life back, something broke in it. And over and over again, it's throughout Scripture. Jesus comes and models it for us. And then, to give us a visual, he goes, by the way, when you meet, why don't you do this as often as possible? Break bread, pour out the wine, so that you're reminded this is how it works. And I came to do this for you, so when you do this, would you not only be reminded of how it works in your own story, but would you also go back and remember that this is what I did for you? My body broken, my blood spilled. And here's an interesting scriptural correlation. I'm going to go all the way back to, the Genesis story? God creates man out of clay, and then what does he do for man to have life? Breathes life into him, right? So now man has life. What do we know about man? Man gets broken, exposed. When Jesus arrives on the planet and starts gathering followers, they hang out with him for 3 years, and they don't get it. By the way, that should be encouraging for some of you. If you're like, I've been trying to do the Jesus thing, I'm like, I don't get a lot of that. It's okay. They were with Jesus, hanging out with him, and didn't put it all together. Why? Because Jesus was exposing the codependency in Peter. He was exposing the faulty political motives of Simon the Zealot. He was exposing what their real motives were until they were completely broken and devastated, hanging out in a room going, I thought this whole Jesus thing was going to be something else. All of their expectations are dashed. They're broken in this place. And what happens? We often talk about Pentecost, and that's kind of a big deal, but there's a little verse wedged in right after Jesus resurrects. And here it is. He shows up in a room, and Peter says, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. You don't get to stay broken. You're not going to remain stuck. And how? You go, whoa, but what happens? How do I heal? How do I get moving again? And with that, he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. Breath to breath. You know what's happened with some of us? Our stories have been breathed on. And do you know what happens with these disciples after this passage? There's about 40 days of training, recalibration, reorientation, and then what? They go change the world. Some of them die within the next few years as martyrs. Peter gets up and preaches a sermon. 3,000 people get saved. John's out there healing people. What happens? They're different human beings with this internal counselor, and it was on the backside of brokenness. So we don't run away from brokenness. No. We embrace it.
In fact, that's really the creator identity, right?
Yes.
If you look at Picasso, if you look at all the people that you guys studied in the Poets and Saints stuff, what made them really good creators and makers was their broken story.
No question.
Their difference, their uniqueness. I mean, that's a nice word to put.
Yeah.
You're unique. Actually, you're kind of weird.
Yeah.
You're kind of messed up. You've got some stuff that you need to work through. But that's what really makes for a great story.
When I say we're jacked up, it's with great affection.
Yeah.
There's so much flavor. Part of what makes you as a church, people are like, tell me about your church. I'm like, well, there's a lot of flavor there. Well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, if you meet some of our folks, it's quirky, it's different. A lady stopped me right in between the two gatherings, and she goes, hey, normal is a setting on a washing machine.
That's good. That's good.
That's not what I want to be.
I'm going to steal that.
And she's this Presbyterian lady, like sharp, put together lady. And she was like, I never thought about myself as creative, and I realize how creative I am. I'm like, come on, you go, girl.
That's great.
Let's go.
And it's peppered all throughout Scripture. You've got Psalm 107 too. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. So, again, going back to this Poets and Saints project, this is one expression of the redeemed of the Lord telling their story. You guys, there's a bunch of people in this community that worked on that, from Sarah to David to Leslie to
Zach,
you wrote a book to Zach, yeah. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's awesome. There's like a book, there's an album, it's awesome. There's a little like DVD curriculum kit and everything. It's really cool. So, And if you look at the essence of what that project is about, it's about redeemed people or
Yes.
very broken people telling great stories. You got C.S. Lewis, you got William Wilberforce. These are people who are in the midst of their brokenness and choosing to still craft a narrative out of that, to actually
They're giving something to the world.
Yes, they're providing value. And so what I would love to know from you is like, how, but besides the Poets and Saints things, which is great, it's awesome, like what other stuff do you see this community birthing in the next couple of years?
I think a lot of things, but I need to say this before I talk about what I see happening over the next few years, is I think there's been a hesitation for us in this town to make stuff. And here's why. We live in the center of Christian industry. And that phrase is kind of a bit of a misnomer. How do you take Christian as an adjective next to kind of an impersonal thing?
Right.
And there's always been a tension there. And doing this research on these poets and saints actually helped me. Because I went back to the life of Martin Luther and I realized Martin Luther was the first social media guy. Martin Luther made a little pamphlet. Well, first he wrote a thing on it, and legend says he put it on a door. But he wrote up this thing, and the premise of what he wrote was, hey, I don't think we should charge for forgiveness. That was his baseline. I don't think we should charge for forgiveness. So he's fighting against money being used for the wrong motivations inside the church. Mm-hmm. So as a part of you, you're like, yeah, way to go. Like, let's fight, peddling Jesus for money. Mm-hmm. That's what he was against. Yet what winds up happening is his pamphlet takes off. Some of the printing press had been invented by, I think, 100 years earlier. Some college students they start printing off his stuff. They start sending it all over. Within weeks, it's all over the whole country of Germany. Hmm. And this whole Reformation is beginning. And literally, I think it's 6 months or 8 months, a year later, they can't, the church, the monarchy, nobody can handle it. They bring Martin Luther before the trial. And we know what he's got? All kinds of Christian products on the table. He's got a merch table at the trial. Pamphlets, books, all these things he's written. And on trial, they're like, did you write that? Yep. Did you write that? That's mine. Did you write this over here? That's mine too. And I realized, wait a minute. So Luther was creating something that was meant to give something back to the Christian community to help them. John Newton and William Cooper are two guys in England. They're writing together. They've written all this poetry. They've started to put some melodies to some of the songs. And it was, I think we should put it in like a book, call it a hymnal, pass it around. Let's pay. We're going to have it covered, and people are going to pay for it. And the next thing you know, Amazing Grace hits the planet because that's one of the songs in there. So one of the things that's happened for us is to go, how do we live in this tension of not peddling Jesus, driving around with a Jesus bazaar, and going, well, I'm going to take advantage of the gospel to promote my agenda or to become wealthy. On the other hand, how do we at the same time make great resources that genuinely help the Christian community, and not just the Christian community, because part of our goal is how do we make great art that speaks to the world, not just the Christian community. Right. How do we make great art? And in order to make it, there's payment involved. So one of the things we've tried to do is go, we're willing to walk in that tension. And I know I have some of you on both sides of this fence. And so here's an invitation to you. For those of you that are like, everything should be given away, we should never charge for a thing. Good, keep talking. Let's live in that tension. For those of you who are like, wait a minute, if we're going to create great products, people need to give a tip. It doesn't have worth if they don't give something to it. And so somehow it has to be monetized. So both crowds, I want you to know, let's keep having the dialogue. Because maybe we'll stumble into some other way as a conduit of giving resources to help people that we haven't come across yet. But here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to walk in fear anymore. We're not going to be afraid that somebody's going to misunderstand us, someone's going to judge us, somebody's going to go, there's a church and they wrote a book or they did a curriculum. And I got to tell you, for a long time I was hung up on that. When I wrote Love Well, true story, a publisher called me. They said, we'd like to do this thing with Love Well. And I'm like, that's fine. Just so you know, I won't do any marketing for the book. The publisher was like, well, that's a problem because you have to tell someone that it exists. I was like, not me. Marketing's a bad word. I'm not doing it. My agent was on the phone call. She was like, you know what? We'll get back to you. I'll have a conversation with James. And I remember just sitting there going, she's like, but you have to tell people it exists. Yeah. And I'm like, but I don't know how without being gross. Anyway, all this to say, we're going to live in the tension. We're going to create things. The video that this team of people put together is beautiful. It expresses something. There's imagery in it. So one of the things that I see ahead for us, some of you are writers. Our songwriters, the first song we sang this morning came from our songwriters. Got together at a retreat, wrote that song. So powerful. Yeah. Some of you, I know some of you are working on novels. Some of you are working on poetry. Some of you are working on books. Some of you are working on music. I see film is a big part of it. We had a Hollywood director come to us, connected with us as a church through Brett, Mark Papata, a couple other things. Because of the prop closet, some of you guys remember that, where we were giving things away to raise money for whatever was happening in our future. This crazy stuff happened. Hollywood director, best friends with George Lucas, or I don't know, something like that. He's made for 8 years or something. He had this film he wanted to make that had Christian themes, but he didn't know how he was going to do it. Have to be a cheap budget. He needed to have people involved. Our church gets involved. I don't know, 10, 20 people. And it's coming out at Christmas, and Sony just picked it up for distribution. It's going to be in films all over the country. And our church it wouldn't have happened without our church. We got involved to help this Hollywood guy who's like, hey, nobody in Hollywood wants to do this. Can you help? And there's apparently 2 primary Christmas movies coming out. One's called Dirty Santa 2. It's a family film. And this Christmas film called Believe. And those are the 2, I guess, primary. Awesome. And so those kinds of things. Yeah. And the other thing I think I see happening in the immediate future are those who have the gift of organization and those who have the gift of problem solving. Because we're going to have the how. Mm-hmm. People are creative. They have last week, if you haven't heard the message from last week, just the idea that we have spiritual gifts, we have special powers. And once I identify what that is, how do I use it? So if I really am a creator or maker, if I really have something in me that's creative, how do I do it? Part of the next few weeks is to talk about the how. And we need people who are going to help us with the conduit.
It's really good. So kind of dovetailing into that, I realize I'm sort of the token creative director, millennial guy up here saying, you know what, we're all creative. We're all creative. And I don't know if everybody feels that, and I totally get that, because what about the person who's like, I've never written anything. I'm never going to pick up an instrument. I don't sort of fit into all these examples you just gave. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not like I really want to get this point across that we see everybody as a creator, as a maker. So can you speak into that more?
Sarah said this beautifully a few weeks ago when we were talking about poets and saints. She said, one of the things about our church is we parent creatively. So I sat with a mom today who got involved in foster care, and she is discovering all of the nuances that go along with that. She sat then with a support group this week, and she said she's one of the people that said to me, I never saw myself as creative, and I realized I am. So I'm creative in the way I parent. Yeah. This other lady who I met today said, I'm creative in the way I problem solve. Let me do a little thing for you guys. You especially if you're married or you're dating, consider this a gift. I hope it goes well. If it does, you give me credit. If not, don't email me. You know how sometimes your spouse might go, hey, we need to do something creative. Let's not just go to dinner and talk about the kids or just talk about the jobs. Or let's have a creative thing. I'm going to give you, here it is. Here's the creative thing. I want you to look to your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or maybe do this with a roommate or whatever. Look to them, and this is what I want you to ask. What do I do really well, and I'm not aware that I'm really good at it? What's the thing that I do, and it's just normal to me? But you'd go, no, that's not normal. You're really good at that. Now, if it's really quiet on the other side of the table, I realize that could be problematic. But I don't think that'll happen. And here's why. Because every one of us has some of you, my wife is this. My wife is a phenomenal cook. It does not matter. We got married. I gained 30 pounds the first year we were married. Not lying. Now, granted, I weighed like $140, so I needed to gain some weight anyway. I was out of college. But I remember we had guests over, first year marriage, a couple months, and she's like, I think I'll make an apple pie. I'm like, is that like what people do? They just you've never done that before? Yeah. She's always like that. We'll go to a restaurant. She'll be like, oh, I like the way you did that. And this week, we'll have the same meal because she made it. And I'll be like, you're so amazing. That's incredibly creative. She has so much trouble acknowledging that. She's like, what? That's normal. It's easy. Some of you in the way you cook, some of you in the way you parent, some of you in the way you guide, some of you in the way you discipline. You bring a certain creativity. And that's the thing we want to highlight.
Can you just talk about Kevin for a minute? Because we got to mention
good
him.
heavens.
Because he is the token, like, oh, I would not call myself a creator, but oh my goodness.
Kevin is our executive pastor. He's been with us 6 months and is the reason I'm not in the hospital. I can laugh about that now. But Kevin, he's a nuts and bolts guy. But one of the things Kevin said when we hired him, he's like, I have one thing you got to know about me. If there are not enough problems, I get bored. I was like, well, I think we can come up with problems. And he just is phenomenal at resourcing and problem solving. And he's so creative in the way he does it. So and I do think that's part of the next season. Some of you who have those kinds of problem solving organizational skills, we're going to have people that are going to go, hey, I think I do have a superpower. My superpower is I'm really great at faith. Like, that's a thing. I'm really great at faith. And so I want to go do something brazen. Let's risk. What do I do? And then I need one of you to go, well, I'm not good at faith, but I can tell you creatively how I can send you off to a foreign land, to the moon, or back to your parents' hometown. Like, whatever the thing is you got to go do, and they can interpret that. You know, like interpreters. I think we need interpreters who are helping guide people. I'll give you one quick story. The gentleman was with us in the first gathering, but last week when we talked about this, he came up to me and said, I'm an architect. I moved my family from the West Coast all the way to here, and I moved here. We knew one person. We had no idea. I just felt like God was calling us. So, superpower, faith. He said, I've been an architect. I love to create. Things are changing in the architectural world. I feel like there's very little room to create. And I went on this mission trip to Nicaragua with the students. I've been a journey. Things have changed in my heart. Our first Sunday here, we were like, this church is weird. We wouldn't come back. We went to another church. But our kids kept coming, so we came back. Now we're weird with you. But he said, there's something going on inside, and I don't know what it is, but I had this vision of me speaking. And so, by the way, I had him come up the first gathering. He had no idea. And so I'm like, well, your vision's being fulfilled. And
he loved it too.
Yeah,
he was just so into it. No.
He was so nervous. And when he walked away, he said, I'll get you back. That was his closing line. But what he said was this. He said, I was driving the last couple weeks, and I was praying, and I felt like God was saying, I'm meant to tell my story. And he said, I said to God, my story is not very flattering to me. He said, I'm driving past Cool Springs, and I heard God say, no, it's not flattering to you, but it's flattering to me. And he said he just started weeping. And he said he wasn't like snotty. He wasn't, he could still drive. But he said he was looking to his left and his right because tears were just pouring down. And he said, I'm realizing like there's something else I'm meant to do. And there's an architect driving down the road going, I have to create somehow. Somehow I'm meant to tell my story in a way I didn't plan. Which maybe it was just as simple as today. Maybe that was enough. I suspect there's more.
And I think that's beginning to happen in our community. I love that. We're talking about Kevin being a really good problem solver, and there are other problem solvers in this room. One of the definitions in the dictionary of imagination is the ability to face and resolve difficulties. And so around this idea of creating and making, we keep on running into this word, imagination. So this sort of reimagined purpose statement, no pun intended,
yes,
is we're here to awaken the imagination to God's love story. We're here to awaken the imagination to God's love story. That's it. If we had to kind of sum up our purpose in one word, we're here to awaken, or one sentence, we're here to awaken the imagination to God's love story. Can you unpack what that looks like, especially since imagination kind of feels like a kid's word, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Like the last time, I imagine a lot, but I feel like I'm not supposed to sometimes because that's something that's just for kids.
I think there is a pressure sometimes in the church world, like imagination is wrong. Like, I think some of the trickle-down Puritanism, this is the history guy in me coming out, but is like everything's about prudence, control, competency, efficiency. The Western church does not handle ambiguity real well. And the Western church is really not poised or in a posture that longs for mystery. And I think it's something our Eastern brothers and sisters can actually, which, by the way, just so you know, the faith that we follow is a Hebraic faith, which comes from the East. The way they lean into what they would call intuition, but the sense of mystery, which is really the Spirit. What is the Spirit saying? And sometimes we're so obsessed with our kind of rational thought, and this is part of our post-enlightenment thing too, but we want to move everything into logic. Well, sometimes we're supposed to do the illogical. And that's where great innovation comes from, which is hopefully one of the things we do as a church. We keep reimagining what it means to be the church. The one thing we've said all along is if we're going to build a building or buy a building, the first question will be, how does it serve the needs of the community? So we've had conversations about a Sabbath retreat center, about a community center, about collaborative space for artists, or all of the above. And so whatever the building thing is, we're starting the question with not how a thing sits empty and we meet our needs first on Sunday, but how does it serve the needs of the community? And then we'll kind of structure around that. Well, what if every church in America, when it came time to a structure, asked that question? Isn't that a little bit of reimagining the church? And that's the goal. That's the desire. It is a kid's word, but we're meant to be childlike. Those of you, how many of you saw the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the old 70s movie with Gene Wilder? Has a lot of you seen it? Okay. When Gene Wilder sings pure imagination, that's the first time I was introduced to the word. This pure imagination, I was licking the wallpaper in my parents' home. Imagine it tasting good. But seeing the Chocolate Factory and imagining like that much candy.
The snozberries taste like snozberries.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing.
Love it.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I think it's something we're meant to embrace. And I love the fact that you've put that back into who we are, because what's ahead is for us to not settle in and coast and go, well, we're 10 years old now, let's just coast and whatever else. And I honestly think that God clearly won't let us. I think it's part of the disruption of the season to go, no, there were some things that were a part of who you were in the beginning, and they can't go away. They have to stay who you are. You're nomadic right now for a reason. Maybe we'll be nomadic forever. Dear God, please, not that. But if it's your will. But for us to make sure we are continuing to dream and imagine what happens in the future.
That's good.
Aligning with what God is doing and joining Him there.
That's great. You touched on this verse that has honestly become kind of old and tired to me because I've grown up just reading it one way, like my entire life. And it's Romans 12:2, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I know for years I just kind of put that in the category of, okay, like don't do what everybody else in college is doing or in high school is doing or in, insert whatever they're like, don't drink too much, don't have premarital sex, all that kind of stuff. What I realized kind of throughout this whole process and during this season is that there's a lot more to that. Like that's actually an invitation to be weird. Like that's an invitation to freedom.
It is.
Tell me about that.
No, because the world and unfortunately some religious systems the structures are set up to pressure us to conform. Do you know, those of you, my history people in here, I don't know if Natalie's in here, she's a teacher at Independence. My history people, am I right, Natalie? The cycles of history typically are some dictator or some organizational structure that is power over, that seeks to control, get everybody to conform, because then a few can have, while most have not, and that conformity allows for control. All Jesus is doing as he walks the planet is he keeps disrupting control, and he keeps disrupting a power over system by saying, hey, I want you to be creative with the way you live. And his followers are going, well, how am I creative? Hey, you know when the Roman soldier tells you have to walk a mile and you're under Roman rule, and he tells you, pick up my stuff and walk. Let's go. And you have to. It's the law. You walk a mile. Yep, I'm a slave. I'm walking like this. I got to do it. I got the Romans gear. I get to the end of the mile. The law is you have to do it for a mile, but that's it. You put it down. Jesus says, hey, I want you to go 2 miles with it. Now, we sometimes go, that's just like that's putting a little extra effort out. No. Do you know what the deal is? Jesus is disrupting the whole system, because you know what happens at the end of that mile? You got the soldier stuff. You get to the end of it. He's like, all right. You go, no, I'm good. I'm going to keep walking. In that moment, the Roman soldier's entire system is disrupted. He could say, okay, go ahead. Great, I'm going to get another mile out of you. But if he does, he risks breaking the law and being punished for it. So just picture that moment. No, I'm good. I'll go another mile. You know what? So could you put that down? No, I'm good. No, put it down. No, I'm your slave. I want to carry it for you. No, put this stuff down. Now. Oh, all right. You don't want me to do this for you? No, put it on the ground. Okay. Like Jesus was doing all these little things to disrupt the system. That he calls us to be agitators. He calls us to be nonconformists so that we're not giving our lives over to some control mechanism that wants to squeeze the life out of us. And some of us came from family of origin systems where our parents lived in fear. They just wanted us to be a certain way and sit up straight and do the thing and wear the whatever. Why? Because they were just afraid and they were insecure. And we are determining in our hearts to not live in fear.
All right, come on.
I'm a little fired up about that.
So let's do it.
But hang out in the Gospels this week. If you can read through the lens, if you read the red letters in the Bible and you read like that, you go, Jesus was an agitator, he's a nonconformist, he's disrupting the system. You might read the Bible in ways you haven't ever read it before.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be like, oh, look at that. He's a priest, he's a prophet, he's a pastor, he's a king, he is God. He does not surrender to conformity.
That's good. So one of the tasks that we had after the listening phase, after the writing phase, is to breathe some visual life into this new season at Journey, this story that we're developing, that we're writing. And create an image, something that we could like go, because we used to have this compass thing. Right. But what is something that really encapsulates who we are and where we're going? Yeah, and so we updated the logo. We kept some of the circular elements, the compass elements, like that was really good stuff, but we put a little spin on it, and we just want to show you a video that kind of outlines some of the meaning and thought that went behind sort of this new version. Here we go.
The main icon for Journey has three concepts intertwined into a single symbol. The first concept shows three circles locked to each other. This aspect represents our desire to know, live, and tell the good news of the gospel. It also represents the bond and perfect community which only exists between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The second concept is the idea of everlasting life. This larger circle represents time and is also interlocked with the circles that represent our relationship to the gospel. The third concept is a compass needle. The compass, like the church, points to God. If you notice, the compass needle and the Trinity are hardly touching. This creates a tension, which represents the state of the kingdom, here now, but not yet fully realized. The inside of the compass repeats the same pattern of the outside, except for one detail, an oval bottom which creates the shape of a drop. If you've been a part of our family long enough, you've seen one of these fall from your eyes. Tears are a part of our story, as much a part of our story as another kind of drop it represents, a drop of blood spilled on a cross at Calvary. This is an original typeface created just for our community at Journey. The letters are modern, but at the same time carry an ancient liturgical feel to them. If you'll notice, there are separations in each letter. This represents our imperfect stories in process of being connected and ultimately restored. Together, it's simply a marker we've etched on our way home. The needle, the drop, the rings, the letters, all elements you'll begin to notice both together and apart that reflect and represent our identity as a community of restorytellers.
animators, designers, typeface guys, just people in our community. This is a perfect example of people coming together to collaborate to create something so beautiful.
And if you guys notice throughout the course of the week, everything from the website to the app to social media, it's the stuff that you see in the hallway is just changed, is different, and there's so many people who have put hours and hours into making that happen. And so it's a testament to this community and what they can do, what's actually possible. For me, it's been like a kid in a candy store coming in 4 months later. But, wait, what? Wait, you do this for a living? You score videos? Well, I have some videos for you to score. It's been awesome. It's been so cool. So one of the things I'm most excited about is this kind of reimagined vision statement. I like to call them possibility statements. Like, what's the possibility here? And the possibility statement, again, a lot of this is in the booklet that we handed out to you guys. It's on your seat. The possibility is, what if church wasn't a destination but a journey? What if church wasn't a destination but a journey? And dude, I bet you could write like a whole book on that over the past couple of months. Like, what if church wasn't a destination but a journey?
Yeah.
Right?
You're right. One of the things, if you've been a part of our church for any length of time, the last 3 or 4 years, part of the focus has been we keep moving. So a location has been a primary goal for us to identify where we're going.
Yeah.
But it's funny, we're going to get there. Somebody just said this to me the other day. It's funny, we're going to get there, whatever. Maybe we're not, but I assume someday we're going to actually have a place we lock into at least for a while. And people are going to go, oh yeah, this is a great building, or glad you can use this for whatever. We're going to go, oh, well, let me tell you the story about getting here. Like, how much, when people ask you something about your story, how much is like the real storytelling part, the interesting part, is the redemptive part, is the getting there for your own stories. And I think it's truly the case for us too. And, to embrace that. We call this journey for a reason. That it does not matter. You may have slept with your girlfriend last night and rolled in here this morning. You may have been hammered and you're still working it out right now. Maybe you shot up this morning before you came. You might be an agnostic. You might be an atheist. You might be in some place behaviorally where you go, this is the last place I probably should be, but somebody told me it was safe to walk in here. It is, and here's why. Because Jesus met with people where they were. We're going to engage a relationship with you. It does not matter where you are. It does not matter what you're working out. Now, there are expectations regarding how we function together as a body. And if you go, well, I want to be a part of this, then we're going to go, well, let's give you an outline for what Jesus talks about living. There are some things that you're going to probably have to clean from your life. Why? Because you're missing out on what God has designed for you. So we're going to walk through that. We're going to have accountability, there are boundaries, just like any healthy relationship. But you're welcome. You're not shunned because you have questions or because you have doubts. And some of you are deeply mature in your faith. You've known God for a very long time. And this might be the place where you get to give some of that away. You got other people who are asking the questions you were asking 20 years ago. And you've been on a journey of figuring that out. Like, that's who we're meant to be, because that's a reflection of the kingdom. Of people finding their way. If you read the book of Mark from top to bottom, you know what's interesting is Jesus doesn't close the deal with people. The whole book is about people's pre-salvation journey. Struggling with faith, questions of morality, and they don't. And when you read the whole thing top to bottom, most of them don't come to faith until the resurrection. And what is the story of journey right now? What's interesting is we're not being replanted, but we are being rebirthed.
I think what's so interesting is for years I've had conversations over coffee with people about, like, God, what if the church wasn't these four walls and it lived outside? Like, everybody really wants that, and so I feel like when we actually spoke that, and I say this as humbly as possible because this is before I got here, but I feel like after hearing your guys' story and digesting it a bit, it's like God was like, you really want that? Okay. Like, here it is, and what's
it's
really
hard.
cool, and I'm feeling that it's hard even after being 4 months, but there's something so beautiful about being here in an old YMCA that's like, use throughout the week for, I call it Franklin Ninja Warrior, but it's like, what do you call it, no-joke kind of stuff? Like, it's awesome. And the fact that we're kind of like crammed in this old house in the center of downtown Franklin, like we can't hide. Like God's not letting us hide. God's not letting us hide in four walls. He's going, okay, you want to be a journey? You want to be a church that is not centered around a destination? I feel like it's, again, and I know it's been tough, and I know there's been a struggle, but I almost feel like it's grace to go, all right, here it is.
Yeah.
Go.
It is.
I'm going to give it to you.
When you're determined to feel and really live, I've used this phrase back in the early days a lot, like life should be gulped and not sipped.
Mm.
If you really want to feel, it's going to hurt.
Mm.
You want to live vulnerably with people, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
But pain's part of the human experience, and I've hurt a lot in the last 8 months, maybe proportionally more than ever in my whole life. But I've also been loved deeply and sensed the being loved more deeply. And those things go together. Brene Brown says you can't numb. I'm just going to numb my pain, you can't selectively numb. So if you numb pain, you numb beauty.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe that's a pretty good summary of who we are. Like if you're like, hey, ignorance is bliss, and you guys are really disrupting my current posture for living, that journey's not for you. That's cool. There's a lot of options. If on the other hand you go, no, I'm determined to feel, I want the beauty and I'm willing to take the pain, then come along for the ride and know, like, there's going to be moments you need us as a hospital, and we'll be here. We may not get it right all the time, but we'll be here. We're determined to walk together. And that is one of the things that excites me about more than anything about where we're going.
That's awesome.
What excites me is you, honestly. I said this right when we were our last Sunday at Church of the City, but you as partners, you guys own this like never before. Like we own it together. Like it truly feels like this is a church of people that are like, this is us, and we're not going down without a fight. And we are in a fight. And we forget that sometimes. We're in a battle. There is a villain. He wants to destroy us. And there's a solidarity right now in our church. I think we're stronger than we've ever been in our entire history. We have a new team that's highly skilled. I think we're poised for something that's going to blow our minds. I actually think we're going to get there wherever there is, and God's going to go, you just didn't dream big enough. And so part of the reason for the wandering was I needed to clean some stuff out, and I wanted you to imagine again.
That's good. That's good. So for all the practical problem solvers in this room right now, you guys can all take a deep breath because we're going to talk about how we're actually going to do this, or how we, at least are going to attempt to do this.
Yeah.
And 3 S's, right? Story-driven liturgy, soul environments, and serving and sending. I just want to unpack each of those really quick because these are kind of the expressions. And again, a lot of this is in these booklets, but how we actually live out this mandate to go and awaken the imagination, the God's love story. So story-driven liturgy, let's talk about this a little bit. I think we are doing it right now, but give us a little context.
I won't spend a lot of time here because I think if you've been around Journey, you know that story is a centerpiece to who we are. But we believe this is a great love story. We've been invited into it, and you can describe the love of God by actually sharing your story. There are redemptive threads in every story. It doesn't matter what it is. From Star Wars to Lord of the Rings to any movie you've ever seen, redemption is in every story.
Soul environments, what are those?
We determined early on we were going to be vulnerable with one another. And the recovery movement does this about as good as anybody. But we just decided, you know what, we don't want to live plastic. And so instead of just how are you and responding with fine, we might actually respond with how we're doing. Mm-hmm. And to choose to live below the surface and to drop down with what's really going on. When I saw a guy this morning, how you doing? He said, pretty good. What would take you from pretty good to great? Oh. You got to pause to think about that for a minute. So when somebody says, I'm fine, say, what would take you from fine to good? I just, tell me more. I want to know you. And so some of it, obviously, there's just the polite interaction, but the determination is to be connected and to be known.
Yeah, it's a being place.
It's a being place.
And what about serving and sending? Why is that such an important part of our identity in the past and then moving forward?
If you don't serve, you're not healthy. It's really that simple. If you are not serving anyone, you'll find this out later because you'll hit a wall or you'll get exposed somehow, but there's something in you that's not healthy. We're designed as servants. We're meant to be servants. So one of the reasons physiologically, after you get married, 2 years after you're married, about that, the infatuation thing goes away. That's a physiological response. You're supposed to be less infatuated with each other. Why? Because if you were just obsessive all the time, you'd never have kids because you'd just be into each other all the time. Some of you are like, oh, that's what happened? So you're like, oh, I just wish it was when we were dating. No, you're actually designed for it not to be exactly like that. Why? So you'll invite some other people into your life and maybe have children, whether it's adoption or foster care, or you give birth. You know what happens when you have kids? Your life gets disrupted. You are less selfish, and you don't have a choice. It changes you. And you're like, this really is hard, this kid thing. But what happens? You became a servant to that child. You don't have a choice. And so it's the same, whether it's serving inside the church, meeting the needs, whether it's as simple as stacking chairs or volunteering, or whether it's serving the widowed, the poor, the orphaned, the centerpiece for the gospel, we have to serve. The recovery movement, again, I'll reference them again. The 12-step, I think I've been bringing this up a lot lately, is you can't stay sober if you don't serve. And the truth is, whether you're part of recovery or not, we all have addictions. If you get really on, oh, you could do that on your date night too. Honey, what's my addiction? Maybe save that one for a few more dates. But if you, because we all have one, there's some proclivity. Like there's a place we go to medicate. And you know what? When we serve, it helps keep us sober and keeps us from giving into that addiction.
That's good. That's good. It's funny, there's so many different expressions of Christianity all over the world.
Yeah.
You can't really, no matter how you read the Bible, you cannot get away from the fact that, hey, God's kind of like, it's a big deal.
Servanthood is the centerpiece to this thing.
Yeah. All right, so kind of to close and to summarize, like, what are you most, we talked about a lot of stuff, like, what are you most excited about? If we're about like 10 years old, like just over 10 years old, like, what are you excited about these next 10 years?
I think the stories that are here, and I think the spiritual gifts that are here, I'm anticipating what I'm going to hear over the next few years, that we're going to remember these past couple Sundays. We're doing this for a few more Sundays. I think we're going to go, remember those early days in that martial arts place? Yeah. Well, I was sitting there thinking, maybe I should use this. Maybe I should step out of this. Maybe there's a risk here. Maybe there's a faith here. I've been sitting in the background. I've been crying on the back row. I've been the skeptic on the front row. I'm whatever the thing is, my identity is no longer going to be in that. This is what I believe is true for us. And in a few years from now, you're going to go, that was me. I was the skeptic. That was me. I was afraid to risk. That was me. I didn't think I had any creative thing to apply. And I think God is going to use your spiritual gifts, and ultimately it's going to create a ripple effect. Change the world is a dramatic statement. Honestly, whether or not the world, I know it will because I know the nature of God, but sometimes that feels like an ego thing attached to it, and not always. I think sometimes it's a group, it's a motivator. We want to be significant, we do. But it's less for me about changing the world and more about you changing your life. Because if your life continues to avoid conformity and be your unique you, the world will be different. But let's pull the abstract. The relationships around you will be different. Your children will be more deeply loved. They will know God in ways they didn't know. Why? Because you're risking. You're trusting God in ways you hadn't trusted Him before. Your mom and dad will see a child that they previously didn't see. Why? Well, that was weird. Usually my son gets triggered when I say that to him, and he just showed me grace. Now, your parent may never tell you that, but the fact is something happens inside them, and they just saw the gospel alive in a way they didn't see before. That's what I think is going to happen. And out of that, out of us living out these spiritual gifts, whatever the conduits are, and that's for you and Kevin to unpack in the next few weeks, whatever the how is, what I think is going to happen is it will play out in some artistic forms like film and writing and poetry and some of those things. But I think it's going to come out in the way we parent. Who knows what comes out of here? Like somebody does foster care that never would have done foster care. And there's this way of creative parenting. That someone does something and the church is being reimagined. And somebody else goes, well, that church over there thought about meeting the community's needs before they built a building. That sounds like a good idea. Maybe we should try that too. And now our whole community is transformed in Des Moines because someone looked in on our story. We're not afraid to tell our story anymore. Yeah. And I think some of us, in the fear of pimping Jesus.
It's not our story.
That's the fear. But the fact is, while there's a hesitation and an appropriate piece to that, if we're really walking with God and identifying where he's moving, then we can shed that fear and walk with boldness and go, no, I'm going to bring my life and bring my gifts to your feet and your throne. And the good news is that there are a lot of strong personalities here. So when we get off track, or when we go, we probably shouldn't have done that one, we'll talk about it and we'll work it out. I think I'm going to be apologizing more than I have in a long time in the next 12 months. I'll go, well, that didn't work out. Seemed like a good idea at the time. We thought we were interpreting God. We missed it. Sorry. And then other things we're going to go, hey, we tried this thing, and you're not going to believe this. But look at the way these people's lives were blessed. We're not going to live in fear. We're willing to fail, and we're going to create. And I can't wait. You on board? You with us? And if you're not, it's okay. You might be an S on the personality, and you're like, I got to think about this for 4 days before I can respond. It would be incongruent for me to clap right now, and the fact that my husband clapped is making me mad because we haven't even talked about this yet. It's okay. I'm not mad at you. Like, it's all right. And I'm glad you're here. And we need you. Because some of you skeptics in here, you lead with skepticism, you're going to see something we don't see. The only thing I'm asking you is don't poop on the party. Like, there are going to be times eventually. That was probably the wrong phrase. I usually use that in kids' programs. But there is a place where when we're behind it, you got to let the negativity go away. So I'm okay with the skeptic, like question stuff, whatever else. But there's also a place where you got to let that negativity go, and we all got to collectively go, yes, here we go. We walk by faith. Can I pray for us?
Absolutely.
Father, I'm just so grateful for your love and thinking about David leading us this morning, just shifting into that chorus that you are a good Father. And for my brothers and sisters who are here right now, and there's an enthusiasm within them, and there's an excitement, but there's on the edge of that excitement is a fear. Because they've been enthused and excited about some dream or something before, or really letting themselves go to imagine, and it didn't happen. God, would you speak to their hearts? Would you give them boldness and confidence? And would you whisper into their hearts this important reminder that you are a good Father? And for those things we imagined or hoped for that didn't come true, because you're a good Father, there's something you were protecting us from. Something we weren't aware of. That's what good fathers do. They sometimes say no. They often say wait. We don't want to be indulgent, snobbish children. We want to be kids that are full of gratitude. And so our fears of being perceived the wrong way, our fears of being judged, the vulnerability that comes with being creative, it's scary. But God, you've told us not to walk in fear, and we might need some daily reminders, sometimes maybe even hourly. But would you at least hear in our hearts, Father, and I feel like I'm speaking collectively, just a multitude of voices that I've heard over the last month saying, we're ready to go. So here we are with our courageous face. And we don't really know where we're supposed to go. Except we're meant to tell people that you are the God of love and grace. And you meet them where they are. And we know we can start there. We know there are spiritual practices that we can lean into so we stay connected to you. And so we do that. We trust you. We worship you. Thank you for a season of rebirth. In Jesus' name, amen.